Okay. So, welcome to game theory. Um, sorry, it's been a quick second since whatever. Okay, so important information. The syllabus can be found at that link. I'm pretty sure that's correct. You can just email me at gametheoryjohn@gmail.com. That almost rhymes. So if you have any questions or if you just want to bring up anything, you could use the ed page or you could email this email address. So we'll meet every Tuesday. We'll meet every Tuesday and Wednesday from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The first class is now. And our last class will be on August 4th. So I guess somebody's audio in their background. So okay, the moderator's here now, so that's good. There's a lot of things going on. All right. So today is day one. So the way that these classes are going to go is that every slide will have some information, or well, hopefully. And at the end of every slide, you can ask questions. And I'm going to ask you guys questions, and I'll need you guys to respond, because if I don't get any feedback, this class will most certainly not last an hour. So this class relies on you guys to a certain extent. So be free to ask questions. Use Zoom chat. If you're going to verbally ask questions, please just wait until I finish the slide. But I very much need your engagement for this class to run smoothly. So please don't be afraid to ask anything. There's no such thing as a stupid question. And even if there was, I would answer it. So what is game theory? So the most basic definition of game theory is just the study of games. And a game is a thing that involves two or more players adopting strategies in order to maximize payoffs. So the payoff is a numerical value assigned to how each player wants a specific scenario. So what is important here is that a player only cares about their own payoffs. They don't care about the opponent. So this is important later on, and it's a common misconception. So game theory just studies these interactions, assuming all players are rational. So we're assuming that all players understand fully what's going on in the game. That does not mean perfect information, but they can internalize what's going on at the moments completely, and that they're going to make the right decision. They're going to attempt to maximize their payoffs. So an example of a game is rock, paper, scissors. In this game, by this definition, there are two or more players, right? Player A and player B. They're adopting strategies. Yeah, they can either choose rock, paper, or scissors. And they're attempting to maximize payoff. They're trying to win, right? So does anybody before we get into the more specific kinds of games, does anybody have any possibilities for what a game could be? Checkers, yeah, that's a good example. Checkers is a great example of a game. Chess is another one. Yeah, everyone's most default answer is checkers or chess. Monopoly is a good example, and we'll get into all of these. These are all very great examples. So keep that in mind. Chess, checkers, Monopoly, all three of these are very important examples to understand how this game works. Smash Brothers probably doesn't work simply because there's so much going on at once. In game theory, you are trying to understand something that is occurring and trying to formalize it into something that you can mathematically understand. Smash Brothers, there's so much going on, and with most video games, there's so much going on that it's probably difficult. Blackjack, That's a bit hard. It's been a while since I played blackjack, so I don't know. Card games where there's multiple people, yes, but I guess because blackjack, I guess that's how you depend on how you look at it. I'm gonna refrain on commenting on blackjack because I'm not sure. Okay, so a game versus a decision. Up. So a game involves gauging what other player or players will do and attempting to maximize one's payoffs. Decisions, there's only one person, right? So a game is rock, paper, scissors, but a decision is what shirt I should wear. So very quickly, just give some examples of a game versus a decision, going off of similar things to this. I mean, I guess I could just give some examples. So I mean, trying to think of some examples. And it's pretty obvious when something's a decision, when something's a game. So I guess this one doesn't particularly matter. Okay, rationality. So the Wikipedia definition is based on or accordance decision, how you should choose to solve a problem. I guess, yeah. I mean, if it's more linear, I suppose. If you're saying, okay, am I going to solve this geometry problem using trigonometry or using coordinate geometry? I guess that's a decision. Trying to decide what Halloween costume to wear so that you don't coordinate is a game. Yes, that's a good example of a game. If there wasn't anybody else, if you were just choosing a costume, that would be a decision. But if you're trying to avoid coordinating with somebody else because there's another player, that is a game. We won't talk about that specific game today, but tomorrow there's a very similar game to that. No, not tomorrow, next Tuesday. There's a very similar game to that that is pretty well known, and you should know, but I'll discuss it later. So yeah, that's rationality. So these are the important features of a game. You need to know these. Most games can be described via this. Every simple game can be described via this. Eventually, you'll get some more complex things where some of these will not be so easy to pin down. But even then, not at least some of these will apply. So the basic features of a game are is it simultaneous or is it sequential? Is it constant sum or not? Is it repeated or not? Is there imperfect information or not? Are there fixed rules or not? Or are cooperative agreements possible or not? So simultaneous versus sequential. Do players make actions at the same time or one after another? So in a simultaneous game, players don't know what the other player is going to choose. Because they're doing actions at the same time and committing to actions, they cannot understand what the person is going to do. But in a sequential game, you're just going one after the other, right? It's person goes, person goes, person goes. So you have information on what has previously occurred. So an example of a simultaneous game is rock, paper, scissors, because both players will choose what hand sign to use at the same time. But a sequential game is chess, because players make moves one after the other. So what are some other examples? What are some other examples you guys can think of? I have some examples in the next slide, but I'm curious what things you guys can think of. What examples you guys can think of, sorry. Sequential game could be dominoes. Yes, in dominoes, you take moves one after the other. I actually haven't played dominoes, but I know that that's how that works. You place dominoes one after the other. So yeah, dominoes is an example of a sequential game. Any other examples? Pong. Um, Once again, video games are kind of hard to do, but I guess because Pong is so simple. Um, I mean, with Pong specifically, I wrote a paper on tennis and game theory. It wasn't a huge paper, but it was a paper nonetheless, more like for my game theory class. Um, and I guess if you simplify Pong enough, yes. Suppose instead of Pong, where all these places are possible, you can move your paddle either to one edge or the other edge. in which case, yes, it would be pretty easy to do, and then it would be sequential. But Pong is kind of hard because you can move your paddle at the same time. I guess don't touch video games. I guess because those are complicated. Tic-tac-toe. That's a good example of a sequential game because you have the grid. I'm going to put my piece in the center, and then you put your piece in the top right. So because we're going one after the other, we're just doing it one after the other. Something simultaneous could be soccer. Soccer, once again, is a pretty hard game to do just because there's so many moving parts. But I have an example similar to soccer. Pool. Pool is an example of a sequential game because you aren't really interacting with one another. There's all these balls which act as random variables, which happens in game theory. And usually random variables do happen in sequential games. So, first guy makes it's the word shot. I don't know. I don't think you don't make shots in pool, but whatever. The first guy makes his move, and then he either continues or he has to give. I don't know the words in pool, but the next guy does it after him. So yeah, pool is an example of a sequential game. So some examples. So simultaneous game is a soccer penalty kick, right? So in this game, the way we're defining it is the penalty kick, the kicker, yeah, that's the word, is sitting at whatever part of the field and has to kick to some part of the goal. And then the goalie is going to decide where in the goal he is to block. So we're going to assume that the goalie can't extrapolate where the ball is going to go based on what the kicker is doing. And we're going to assume the exact same thing for the kicker, that he can't assume what the goalie is going to do based on how the goalie's moving. So in that case, both players are going to commit to something at the same time. The kicker is going to kick to a specific place, and the goalie is going to dive to a specific location. So penalty kicks are an example of a simultaneous game. And I mean, I could probably phone in a European Cup joke in there, but I don't know how to put that in there. So, and then sequential games, most board games are sequential. Checkers, Connect Four, poker, Go, dominoes. All of these are examples of sequential games because you make a move one after the other. Constant sum games. Do all players' payoffs add up to one number for given any scenario? So if you remember, we define payoffs as how much each player values a specific outcome. So in games where we can, some games we can easily define payoff, like in gambling, right? Payoff we just define as how much money you win. So an example of a constant sum game is gambling, because you're either going to lose $100 and somebody else is going to win $100, or you are going to win $100 and they're going to lose $100, right? So in that example specifically, plus 100 plus minus 100 is 0. So not only is that a constant sum game, that is a zero-sum game, because the total amount of points changing hands is always equal to each other. So the sum is always 0. A non-constant sum game is rock, paper, scissors, given that ties are allowed to exist. So if we define a payoff for winning as 1 and the payoff for losing as 0, then if one person wins, then the total net payoff of everybody combined is 1. But if everybody ties, the payoff sum is 0. However, you can choose to redefine rock, paper, scissors such that it becomes constant sum. If you define losing as a payoff of -1, then if somebody wins, they get 1, and if somebody loses, then they get -1. So that's a sum of 0. Or if they tie, then 0 plus 0 is still 0. Yet another way to define rock, paper, scissors, that would be constant sum, as opposed to if it's not constant sum, is if you simply don't allow ties. If ties are not allowed, then you just play again. Then if somebody wins, then they will get 1 point. And then if the other person loses, let's again say that they'll get 0 points. So in that case, the constant sum is 1. So this is a kind of harder one to think of, but what are some other examples of constant sum games? Do you guys have any ideas? This one might be a bit difficult to think of, so I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think of it. Maybe I should actually just go to the examples so you guys can get ideas, because this is kind of a weird one. So a constant sum game is, would chess be constant sum? No, because ties exist. I'm forgetting the word for a tie in chess, because there's a special word for everything in chess. I mean, yeah, it's a draw, but because draws can happen, yeah, stalemate, that's the word, thank you. If a stalemate occurs, then neither player wins. But if one player wins, then they get 1 point, and then the loser gets 0 points. So once again, it depends on how you define payoffs. If you say that losing you get nothing as opposed to actively losing something, then yeah, definitely, then it's not a constant sum. If you're in a tournament, could that possibly be a non-constant sum if there is no entry fee? Okay, I see what you mean. So if you enter a tournament, and if the person who wins gets something, maybe a trophy, is that constant sum? No, that's not. I mean, I guess it is actually, because in a tournament, all these players in the tournament are either going to get 0 points because they didn't lose anything, or let's say that they'll get 1 point by being the winner. No matter what in the tournament, there's only going to be one winner, right? So no matter who wins, the total sum of the outcomes is going to be 1. So in that case, it actually would be constant sum. Any other ones? This one's a bit hard, so I got this wrong the first time. Prisoner's Dilemma. That's cheating. Don't mention things I'm going to mention in future lessons. But yeah, that's non-constant sum, exactly. That's very non-constant sum, and the non-constant sumness is pretty important. Would a game like Pong be constant sum? I mean, I guess that one we can actually apply this to. In Pong, given a single game, I guess, just a single ball, a single point, that's the word. I was trying to think of the word. I played tennis and I still couldn't think of the word. In a single point, somebody's going to either win or lose. So one person's going to get 1 point while the other person gets 0. So yeah, that's an example of constant sum. Yeah, Pong is constant sum. Any others or no? I can just move on. Okay, I think I'll just move on. Okay, repeated games. Does the game happen multiple times? So players have to develop deep plans of action for what to do in each separate game. So during a repeated game, because the game repeats, you have to start thinking very differently. We'll get into it in a future lesson, but repeated games are much more complex than not repeated games. But telling what's a repeated game and what's not a repeated game is pretty simple. Rock, paper, scissors, if you do it once, is not repeated. If you play rock, paper, scissors more than once, then it is repeated. It's pretty straightforward. But I think do multiple rounds, exactly. Are you playing this game more than once? That's it. It's really that simple. If you play, but within repeated games, interestingly enough, there's a difference between playing a specified amount and an unspecified amount. So if you know how many rounds you're going to play, it's actually quite different from if you don't know how many rounds you're going to play. If you don't know how many rounds, then you just act as if you're going to play infinite rounds because you don't know when the last round is going to be. However, if there is a specific number of rounds, then towards the end, you'll start changing your strategy, which is very interesting. So once again, I'm going to ask you guys, what are some examples you can think of? This one's pretty easy. Basically, I don't think there's any possibilities that are kind of in the middle here. So just what are some examples you can think of? Playing chess 10 times. Yeah, that's a repeated game. I don't know if it would benefit from changing strategies, playing chess 10 times, but yeah, that is a repeated game. Any others? Playing 10 hands of poker. Yeah, poker is a good example of a repeated game because there are multiple hands of poker. You are going to play poker multiple times. So that is, and each of those times, because you have diminishing resources, or maybe not diminishing resources, depends if you're good at poker, then the strategy you're playing with is going to have to change depending on each round. Playing any game 10 times. Yeah, basically. Playing 3 rounds of badminton. Yes, you're repeating a round of badminton. That's a repeated game. It's really quite simple. Playing Uno more than once. Yeah, there's as many examples as you can think of. I didn't even bother giving examples because it's so easy. Okay, information imbalance. Do players have the same amount of information? Is it possible for players to lie to one another? So, in a game where there's imperfect information, where I may know things that you do not know, I can give information in order to elicit certain actions, or I can with withhold information in order to make you do certain actions again. So revealing information, whether true or false, is very important to a game where there's an information imbalance. So perfect information is rock, paper, scissors. You can only choose rock, paper, scissors. You're not going to pull out a separate move out of nowhere. Imperfect information, an example is buying a used car because you know very little about the car. You can run a very basic check and see if there's any obvious rust. Does the car start? Very basic things like that. But the dealer knows much more about the car and can selectively reveal information to you in order to up the price that they're paying. Maybe there's a leak somewhere and you don't know that, but the dealer does. And by holding that, he can increase the price. So what are some other examples of a game with information imbalance you can think of? Mastermind or Guess Who? Mastermind is a very good example of imperfect information. Um, However, Mastermind, I mean, it's more so a one player thing. I mean, there is a hidden code, but that player isn't really doing anything. So, Mastermind, while it does have imperfect information, isn't really a game actually, because there's only one player making a series of decisions. So, that's why it's important to know the difference between game and decision, because sometimes it can be a bit less trivial to understand which is which. Guess Who, however, because it has two players who are hiding information, I guess is a game. That isn't information imbalance in the classical sense, I guess, but yeah, because there's some hidden information and information you cannot reveal to one another, it is in fact imperfect information. Yeah. Any other examples? The Split or Steal show in the UK. Unfortunately, if it wasn't obvious, I'm not from the UK. Uh, I don't know how that works, but a lot of game shows, people are withholding information from one another. So it's entirely possible. Unfortunately, I don't know the game. Um, yeah, no. Um, any others that I would? Yeah, this is another problem with the course. I'm not an omniscient god, so I'm not going to know everything you bring up. So, any other ones that I will hopefully know about? Chess. Chess is actually perfectly balanced. Your point, so because both players can see the entire board, you both know as much as the other person knows. Having information on how to play the game better isn't, you know, that doesn't really impact the game itself. that when you look at these aspects of a game, you are not looking at who is playing the game. You are looking at the game itself. And because in chess, the entire board is open, that actually is a game with perfect information on both sides. But that's a good question, yeah. So I guess some of my examples are chess and checkers for perfect information. Everybody knows everything that's going on the board, right? I know, oh, knight is there, king is there, and for checkers, you know where all the pieces are. You know what pieces have been kinged. I think that's the word. And then for imperfect information, an example is poker. So because you're concealing cards and you are bluffing, it's a good example of imperfect information. Fixed rules. This one's kind of weird. This is probably the strangest one, and I will not be discussing this a whole lot in class. So Uno is imperfect too? Yeah, because just like poker, you are concealing cards. That is a good example of imperfect information. So, yeah. Fixed rules. Do the rules of the game change partway through? Can payoffs change? Can players choose to change the rules? So fixed rules is rock, paper, scissors. You're not changing the rules of rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors shall forever stay rock, paper, scissors. Flexible rules. Suppose you're holding a tournament for rock, paper, scissors. The organizer can set the bracket such that their favorite player wins, knowing how the seeding works. Suppose that they know how rock, paper, scissors tournaments work, and they know who's going to win against who, given their magical rock, paper, scissors strategy. So then they can make it such that players only compete in a way such that their favorite player will win. So what are some examples you can think of? This one is really annoying. I'm trying to find. I have the textbook right beside me, so I'm trying to think. Not trying to think. Trying to find other examples of imperfect games. If you guys can't think of anything, I can just move on. But still, cheating is flexible, but I guess not following the rules. In a game that allows cheating, which I guess is kind of an oxymoron, you are kind of changing the rules. Yes, it's not a great example, but there aren't a whole lot of great examples. So I think, yeah, I think that's a fine enough example. I'm going to move on because this particular thing is a pain. Agreements. Can players make agreements? So in rock, paper, scissors, you can't talk in rock, paper, scissors. What's the point? Agreements are possible. So if two companies are setting prices for similar products, they can agree to keep prices the same so that they can split the profits evenly, right? If they both stand to gain by price fixing, they can do that. I mean, they can't because it's against the law, but hypothetically. So what are some examples in which agreements are possible? What are some examples in which agreements are not possible? If you trade a monopoly, good example. You can trade a monopoly and that you can make agreements in monopoly. That's a good example of, yeah, a game in which agreements. Chess. You can't make agreements in chess because you're just playing one another and one player is going to win and one player is going to lose. There's no real point in making an agreement. Most constant sum games, you can't make agreements because there's no way for both parties to benefit equally. Players can agree to make a draw. I guess, but that's. I mean, technically yes, but I don't want to say it's a non-issue because it is true. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you can make an agreement in chess, but looking at the greater chess picture, playing a game of chess, there aren't agreements, but you can make agreements to make a draw. If it's a 1 versus 1 game, for example, 2 players could agree to join to defeat the third player. Yeah, that's a good example. In games with multiple players, um, different players can agree to stab the other players in the back. That's a very good example. Agreements in Go Fish. Um, that's an interesting example. Go Fish is a kind of interesting game because of how information is swapped. But trying to think, that's actually a pretty interesting question. Uh, hmm. Deet, 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 deet. I mean, you can't really decline someone in Go Fish. So I'm going to say no on that one, simply because you don't really have an option to say, no, I'm not giving you the card. So I'm not sure you can make agreements in Go Fish. Okay, so more examples. So you can make agreements in Risk, Monopoly, any game, not any game, but many games with greater than 2 people, you can make agreements. No agreements, yeah, chess and checkers. I know you can agree to make a draw, but that doesn't count. I'm excluding that from the discussion. So that's the end of the presentation. I have some extra exercises we can do. I mean, most classes are going to be longer than this one. I mean, all classes are going to be longer than this one. But because this is just so basic and there's very little to cover, we have some time left over. So I'm going to, I guess, move to this whiteboard. And if you guys have any more questions, please ask them. I mean, now is a very good time. And I have this textbook right beside me, so I'm going to rip questions from it. So, yeah. Please ask any question. I will answer anything. Can you make, so tic-tac-toe. So let's actually analyze tic-tac-toe using, so you guys can just mention games. That's actually not a bad idea. Just bring up a random game and we'll look at all the features of the game using this handy dandy slide I made. Okay, so tic-tac-toe. Where did chat go? Here we are. So is it simultaneous or is it sequential? Tic-tac-toe, because you make moves one after the other, is sequential. Is it constant sum or not? I'm going to say it's not constant sum because if either players can win, one player can win, thus netting them 1 point, or and then the losing player would net 0 points. But you can tie in tic-tac-toe. In fact, if both players are equally skilled, they will tie. In which case, the total payoff sum is 0. So in that case, it's 0 versus 1, so it's not constant sum. Is it repeated? Assuming you're only playing tic-tac-toe once, no, it's not repeated. Imperfect information or not, because all players can see the tic-tac-toe board just as well as the other player. Yes, it's perfect information. All players understand everything that's going on in the board. Fixed rules or not. Tic-tac-toe, the rules are maintained throughout the game. So yeah, I'd say fixed rules. Are cooperative agreements possible? I don't think I've ever seen anybody, not even just make an agreement at tic-tac-toe, but just talk during tic-tac-toe. Like I've seen people play, but I don't think I've ever seen somebody engage with another person during tic-tac-toe. Trash talk. There is actually something. Trash talk is not as irrelevant as it might seem at first. I think I talk about this, but trash talk actually falls into a category. So when you imperfect information or not, revealing information, it can be done in one of 2 ways. So the first way is you reveal information and by actively giving something away. And when you do this, you might be losing payoff. However, so that makes it more credible, right? If you say, "Oh, this is true," and to prove it, I'm going to, lose some payoff, that demonstrates that you are telling the truth in a way. I mean, it's like saying, I guess one example of this is saying, okay, this isn't, this drink isn't poison. And to prove that, I'm going to drink it, right? You are demonstrating that it really isn't poison by potentially losing some payoff by getting poisoned. But if you just say, man, listen, I promise it's not poison. Just trust me, man, it's not poison. That's what's called cheap talk. Cheap, it's because you aren't losing anything. There is no potential loss for payoff. And by simply saying something, you really aren't revealing that much, technically speaking. Whether the other player decides to acknowledge your cheap talk is up to them. So yeah, any other questions or any other just points you want to make? The trash talk was actually a very interesting thing, and I think I'm going to talk about that later. I need to go back and look at my slides again. Okay, I guess we're finished with that. So be free to ask questions. Again, I'll look at them when I finish doing a specific question, because I guess we have around 15 minutes to spare. So let's just do some practice questions, I guess. So these are going to start off dirt simple and then become harder. I don't know where you can get this textbook. Textbooks are uber expensive. If I find a pirated PDF, I might email it to anybody who wants it. Okay, so this first question it's going to go basically in the, oh, my internet sucks. That's good. It's going to go in order of what we covered. So it's going to go from the very simple stuff to the actual parts of a game. So, question 1. Determine which of the following situations describes a game and which describes decisions. In each case, indicates what specified features of the situation caused you to classify it as it did. So, basically, I'm going to read some event, and is it a game or is it a decision, right? And then you don't need to provide an explanation, but it would be good if you did. So, A, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to stop reading it like I'm asking for homework. You guys don't even need to answer this. If nobody answers, I'll do it myself. So a group of grocery shoppers in the dairy section, each shopper choosing a flavor of yogurt to purchase. So is that a game or is it a decision? So one person says decision. Decision. So I see 3 decisions. Okay, so I guess the question isn't phrased particularly well, but so if it was just you choosing your flavor, it would be a decision. But because it's a group of grocery shoppers, it would be a game actually. Because what if multiple people want to choose the same flavor, right? Then they'll have to negotiate, who gets what flavor. And in which case, it would be a game in which payoffs are determined by what yogurt flavor you get. So if it was just you choosing a flavor, yeah, it's clearly a decision. But that first word, a group of grocery shoppers, not first word, but first phrase, that actually makes it a game. So simply because there's more than one person. Okay. B, a pair of teenage girls choosing dresses. I don't know why it says teen. I don't know why it even specifies that they're girls. Just some people choosing dresses. So people are saying game. Game. Um, So once again, this question kind of sucks. Man, these questions aren't very good. It depends how you frame it. Because there's 2 people, if they are trying to do something with their dresses, suppose they are trying to coordinate, or suppose they're trying to not coordinate, then it is very much a game. And I would write game on this personally. But because we don't know if they care about each other's dress, I guess I'm gonna say it's a game. If they don't care about each other in the slightest, if it's just two random people, then I guess they're both making a decision that does not impact one another. But this is not a very good question. For the first one, if there are multiple of each flavor at the grocery store, is it still a game? Um, so the question relates to the first thing I asked. So I guess as long as everybody can choose. So hypothetically, if man, I want to say this but not make it sound annoying. If there's enough yogurt such that if everybody wants the same flavor, they can all get it, then it's not. I guess it's not a game technically, because if everybody can get their favorite flavor and they're all fine, then yeah, it's just a decision. So yeah, I guess again, these questions are kind of vague. So that's this has another secret hidden lesson, and that's defining a game, defining something as a game, and defining payoffs is simultaneously very hard and also incredibly important. If you're analyzing something complex like a sport, you need to make it abstract enough such that you can actually make conclusions based on this. When I wrote my paper on tennis, one thing that I did is I only looked at the serve. I assumed that how the serve went, was based on the final score of the game. And I assumed that the person serving could only go into one of two places, either the left side of the service box or the right side of the service box. And the returner could only, edge towards one of the sides of the service box. All of these assumptions are incorrect to a certain degree, but because I don't have a supercomputer which can analyze every single possibility, I need to simplify it down to an extent which I can understand. So that's probably the secretly most important part of game theory. How do you make a question that you can actually solve? Okay, but back to these questions. A college student is considering what type of postgraduate education to pursue. Is that a game or decision? Uh, People seem to be getting it right. Yeah, it's a decision. Also, for the person who corrected themselves, I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't notice that typo until after you corrected yourself. But yeah, this is pretty clearly a decision. Somebody mentioned, I would guess that the teenage girls picking out dresses probably would care more likely than not. Yeah, exactly. So once again, it depends on do the people care what each other or what the other person is doing. If not, decision. If they do care, then it's a game. Okay. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are choosing the prices for their online subscriptions this year. Is that a game or a decision? Great, everyone's getting this right. I had exactly the same example in my slides. Yeah, this is a game. Price fixing in order to say how much of the market you get is incredibly important to people selling anything. So this is pretty obviously a game. And then E, why am I saying that? I just said that I wouldn't do that. A presidential candidate picking a running mate. This question sucks. I don't like this question. A presidential candidate choosing a running mate. Is that a decision or a game? Yeah, I guess it's a decision, but the fact of the matter is this could be I mean it is a decision, but because it's part of a larger thing, it's just not a very good question. But yeah, it's a decision. Okay. So yeah, after you choose it, then you'd probably do campaign stuff, but just choosing a vice president is probably a decision. Okay. So I'm gonna list some stuff. Why am I on this whiteboard? I haven't even used this whiteboard once. Okay, give me a sec. I'm gonna have this open because the next thing we're doing is going to deal with that. Okay, where's chat? I very much need chat. Okay, consider the strategic games described below. In each case, state how you would classify the game according to the 6 dimensions outlined in the thing. Do I have 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I have the 6. And they have the same 6, right? Yeah. So I'm just gonna say a thing. It's necessarily a game, and then you guys should say how it relates to each of the 6 points. Right? Is it sequential, simultaneous? Is it constant sum? Is it repeated? Imperfect information? Are there fixed rules? And are cooperative agreements possible? So some of these are going to be easy, some of these not so much. Okay, the first one, of course, rock, paper, scissors. What, how does, okay, yeah. Simultaneous, yeah. People seem to be getting that right. Yeah, it's not constant sum. I mean, I swear I did not mean to make rock, paper, scissors, but 3, it depends. Yeah, yeah, that's a good way. So if you're just playing rock, paper, scissors once, then just it's once. But if you're playing it twice, perfect information. Yeah, perfect, great. Does it have fixed rules? Yeah, fixed rules, exactly. And are cooperative agreements possible? No agreements, exactly. So yeah, you guys got that right on the money. So next one, roll call voting. Voters cast their votes orally as their names are called. The choice with the most votes wins. So is this simultaneous or sequential? Yeah, my throat hurts. Yeah, it's sequential, exactly, because people are just saying, I vote for Mike or I vote for Jeff, and they're doing it one after the other. So it is sequential. Is it constant sum or not? So people are saying no. And once again, I am not a fan of this question because it depends how you look at it. So, first of all, it says that the question says that no one can, it doesn't say that there aren't ties, but I'm going to assume that there aren't ties. If there are ties, this question is so annoying. Okay. So, if there are ties, if ties are possible, then it is not constant sum. But if there aren't any ties, then no matter how you define it, so there's 2 ways I'm thinking about defining it. So if one person has to win, and we'll simply award the person who wins 1 point, while the person who doesn't win 0 points, in that case, it's constant sum, right? Because somebody's going to win and somebody isn't going to win. And so the sum is always going to be 1. If points are given based on how many people vote, however, assuming that everybody votes, I don't know if that's an assumption, then the number of points distributed will actually be the same. It will always just be the number of people who voted. However, if people abstain from voting, then it's not constant sum. This is a very annoying question, and because it does not define itself well enough, there are a bunch of possibilities. So, yeah, okay. Is it repeated or not? That's a weird thing to look at. I don't know. I'm gonna say not repeated, yeah. Because I mean multiple people make votes, but everybody only takes 1 vote, so I guess it's not repeated. Is there imperfect information or not? Yeah, perfect information. Because everybody's, yelling who they're voting for, everybody knows who has perfect information. Are there fixed rules or not? Fixed rules, yeah. It's pretty clearly fixed rules. And are cooperative agreements possible? That's a kind of interesting question for this. It doesn't say how many people there are, running. But I suppose if there were more than 3 people running, more than 2 people running, then you could do cooperative agreements. However, if there's only 2 people running, then there would not be. Again, because they did not define the question very well, it is very hard to do. But I'm going to say, yes, it's possible because maybe there's more than 2 people running for whatever candidacy this is. Okay, and the final one. And I think this won't be quite the final one, but we only have like 5 minutes left. Okay, sealed bid auction. Bidders on a bottle of wine seal their bids in envelopes. The highest bidder wins the item and pays the amount of his bid or her bid. I mean, it says his bid, but I mean, woman can vote on wine. So, is this simultaneous or sequential? This one's a kind of tricky one. All right, you guys got it right. It is simultaneous, exactly. Because people are, while it is technically sequential because people put their thing in one after the other, because you do not know what other people are doing and they are all hidden, it is actually simultaneous, exactly. Okay, so is it constant sum or not? I don't know how you define whether this is constant sum or not. What do you guys think? This, again, bad question, but what do you guys think it's constant sum or do you think it's non-constant sum? Okay, so it's because, okay, I'm gonna, so in, how do I, give me a second. Okay, because people are, they are giving their votes, not vote, price at, they might be doing it one after the other, but it's hidden, right? So in practice, you are all giving them at different times. But one, because they're all being opened at the same time, in a way, it is simultaneous. You don't know what other people are doing, so you can't act based on what the other people are doing. A better definition for simultaneous and sequential is sequential, you can act based on what other people are doing. But in a simultaneous game, you cannot act on what people have done. So because you do not know how other people are bidding on the wine, it is actually simultaneous and not sequential. So I guess a way of thinking about, okay, yeah, great. So what do we think about the constant sumness or not? This question, if you guys want to move on, because I'm not actually a huge fan of this. If two people put the same highest number, it is tied. I don't actually know how auctions work if there's a tie. I assume then they just, I mean, I don't think they're going to cut the bottle of wine in half. But let's assume that they won't tie. Let's assume that everybody is going to put in a different amount of money. I'm going to make this, I'm making this question better for them. Come on, Dixit. That's the, yeah, I guess it's, somebody's going to get the wine and then they'll get however much they want for the wine, and then the other people won't get the wine. So I guess it is constant sum. Is it repeated? No, yeah, exactly. Only, there's only one bottle of wine here, so it's not repeated. Imperfect information or not? Yeah, it's imperfect. So this is the interesting thing about auctions. You don't know how much other people are going to bid. So in this case, I might do a day where I talk about auctions. I think I will. I need to look at my lesson plan again. It's been a quick second since I looked at it. But because you don't know how other people are going to bid, you have to kind of extrapolate based on what you think. So that's kind of the interesting thing about auctions. When in a sealed bid auction, you are trying to kind of game the system sometimes. Okay, so fixed rules or not? Yeah, it's fixed. Because the auction is just staying an auction and the rules aren't changing, it is fixed rules. So are cooperative agreements possible? Yeah. Everybody putting question marks. That's the exact response I had. So if we assume that you can only bid with your own money, then no. Then you're just doing it by yourself. However, if you just meet up with some other guy and say, hey, do you want to pool our cash and agree to split the wine? Then yes. So once again, I cannot stress this enough. If you are doing something in game theory, you have to make sure your question is airtight. You have to make sure that everything is defined. Otherwise, people are going to find weird holes in it. And it's not because those people are looking for holes, but because those holes will naturally be found. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. We did some good practice questions. I'm glad we got through basically, everything that I wanted to go through. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Make sure you remember all this stuff. And if you have any questions, just email me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and say bye-bye, everybody. It's been a great, teaching you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.